This is a 1997 Suzuki X-90. It's not just any X-90, this one's my X-90. Now, you might already be jumping into the comments and saying, this is just like a Doug DeMuro review, but hear me out. I don't think Doug will ever actually review this car. He definitely won't review mine, but I don't think he'll get around to reviewing the X-90. I've been waiting with bated breath for a long time, waiting for that review to come, and I just don't think it's gonna come. And let me explain why. For starters, this car's pretty rare. You don't see them very often, but it's for a different reason than you might suspect. It's not rare like a Lancia is rare or a Ferrari is rare. It's rare in the fact that it didn't sell well and people generally don't like it. I don't understand where all the hate for this car comes from, to be honest with you. One of the other reasons I don't think Doug will ever get around to reviewing this car is because he doesn't do modded cars. And if you look online, I'd have to say probably more than 50% of the people that keep the X90 community alive, they all have modded cars. They're either lifted or just modded in general. And I think it's mainly because one of the other reasons he's not going to review this car is because it's just not that quirky. This car has one major quirk, and you're looking at it. It's just the car itself. There's not any crazy buttons on the inside or something weird under the hood or insane in the trunk. It's just a normal car that does a lot of things really well. Now, that being said, not all of the hate for the car is unwarranted. It doesn't have a lot of horsepower. It's not very fast, but it's basically a lifted Miata with four-wheel drive. How many people love pickup trucks? How many people love Miatas? And how many people would actually want that? But for whatever reason, this car still garners a lot of unwarranted hate. And here's the thing. I think it looks great. It's small, it's tiny. It fits that niche of weird car. I don't like normal cars. There are cars that I like that look normal, but normal cars don't excite me. This is definitely not a normal car. It's impractical, it's small, it has T-tops. If you ask any car person, car guy or girl, they will tell you that they have a list of cars that they would like to own before they die. Now, most of those lists will probably have quite a bit of overlap, but every individual has like that one or two, or in my case, 10 cars that probably won't overlap on anybody else's list, but that's what makes car enthusiasm so unique. If you look at my list, and I've got cars that will overlap with just about anybody else's, like a Lancia Stratos or Delta Integrale, Ferrari F40, 308, Di Tommaso Pantera. Those are pretty standard bucket list cars. But at the other end of the spectrum, you've got those cars that probably not a whole lot of other people are as excited about them as I am. Like the AutoZam AZ1, the Mark 1 MR2, the Saab Sonnet 3, or an AMC Eagle. All four of those cars I would love to have, but they definitely fit on that quirky side. So anyway, let's take a look at the quirks and features, if there are any, take it for a test drive, and talk a little bit more about the Suzuki X-90. So here at the front of the car, you can see it's pretty normal. Suzuki badge in the middle, regular headlights, regular bumper, not very quirky. Now, one of the things about the Suzuki X-90 is it's basically built on the same platform as the Suzuki Samurai and the Vitara. Suzuki planned on it being a replacement for the Samurai. It's got the 1.6 liter single overhead cam G16A engine, mated to either a 4-speed automatic or a 5-speed manual transmission, and it's producing about 95 horsepower. Again, nothing really quirky about that engine or the platform. Now, if we come around to the back of the car, you can see again, no quirks. Tail lights, X90 badge, Suzuki badge. It's got a neat spoiler, but I mean, in the 90s, spoilers were cool. Now, not so much. Nothing in the trunk quirky either. Just space for the T-tops, a spare tire, and a disc changer, which I'm assuming was factory installed. Now, moving to the inside, you can see this is where the car actually starts to get a little quirky. Obviously, you've got 2 seats only. You've got T-tops, amazing, but it's not that quirky. There aren't too many options in here. Everything seems super duper normal for a car from the 90s. Now the biggest quirk this car has is this power switch here. When I first bought the car, I had no idea what this switch did. The only thing that I can really tell is you have maybe about 5 or 10 more horsepower when you have that switch to P. Here in the center, we've got our transfer case controls. So you've got 4 low, neutral, 4 high, and 2 high. Now, this car doesn't have a whole lot of power, but to be honest with you, the 4-wheel drive is amazing, mainly because the car doesn't weigh that much. The car has a curb weight of 2,425 pounds. That's basically nothing. I've actually lifted an entire wheel off the ground just trying to get the lug nuts off. So when you couple 4-wheel drive, and it's a full-time 4-wheel drive transfer case, when you couple that with the fact that it's super light, and I have snow tires on this, and you've got a decent enough ride height to get over snow, this thing is invincible in the winter. One of the other cool things about this car is its size. It's 66.7 inches from side to side and 146.1 inches from nose to tail. Now, if this car seems kind of familiar, you might have remembered seeing one of the Red Bull X-90s driving around, which had a giant Red Bull can in the back and sported Red Bull colors across the car. So those are the quirks and features of the Suzuki X-90. Let's take it for a test spin and see what it does on the road, and then we'll give it a faux Doug score. All right, so driving the X-90. This can't really be that good of a review for driving an X-90, but driving my X-90 is unique. It's not in great shape. The suspension is pretty shot, so you feel every bump in the wrong way, but overall, it's very nice. And for the purposes of what I bought it for, I mean, it accomplished everything I needed. I needed a good winter car, something quirky, obviously, or, you know, something that I would enjoy driving and enjoy seeing myself in. And the X-90 ticked just about every one of those boxes. Plus, I'd wanted this car for a very long time. You know, I've seen this car in magazines and stuff like that, and I always thought it was cool, so I really wanted to own one. And at a certain point, every car person should buy some of those cars on their list just to see what they're like. But obviously, the driving experience can leave a lot to be desired. For one, this car has no power. Granted, the engine probably needs to be rebuilt, but at the same time, there's just nothing when you put your foot down. And I mean, like, nothing. That 95 horsepower is probably more accurately maybe in the 60 to 70 range, considering the fact the engine needs to be rebuilt. But I would almost say this car is dangerously slow. You don't want to pull out in front of anybody driving anything, really. You know, I drive a 350 and I feel like that's underpowered sometimes. So this is definitely slow. Other than that, though, I mean, it's comfortable. And T-tops, I mean, T-tops. I don't even know what more to say about T-tops. T-tops are the greatest thing ever. You're just open, you're just out in the atmosphere. It feels great. You've got the hair, you've got the wind in your hair. It's so fantastic. Every car should come with a T-top option. But other than that, I mean, this car is just super duper cool. It's a 2-seater, so you've got the Miata vibes. It's fairly lifted, so you've got, you know, your off-road car vibes. I mean, I've beaten like Subarus off the line in like ice storms, you know, and it's just so much fun. And cars used to be like this. Some cars are still like this. Every car should have some element of fun to it, and this car definitely, just as a vehicle, embodies that fun attitude. There aren't a whole lot of quirks, but when you drive this thing around, you get looks. You get plenty of looks. Half of them, people are probably just wondering, what is that? What's going on here? And the other half are just like kids who are just like, that looks like a toy. And it does. It looks like a toy. It feels like a toy. It drives like a toy. It is a toy. This is my favorite toy. And I think everybody should try to own one at some point. So here, I'm gonna gun it. Nothing. And you know, with the automatic transmission, I'm sure it's just even worse. So no power. Don't come into this car expecting power, because you're not gonna get it. I've seen people do some pretty incredible swaps with this thing, you know, LS1 swaps, all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't put an LS1 in this. I might put, you know, some other turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, you know, something unique, maybe a VR6 or something like that. But you know, the engine bay is, it's a 90s car, so the engine bay is clean and uncluttered. You know, you're free to just pluck the engine out, pluck something new in there. The transfer case is separate from the transmission, so technically, as long as you put anything in there that's going to mate up with the transfer case, you can still use the 4-wheel drive. I'm just going to have fun with this, you know? It's not in perfect condition, so it'll never be a show car, you know, or a museum example X-90, but I wanted this car, I bought this car, I found this car, and that's what every car person should be able to do, you know? It pains me that I'll probably never own an S2000. Those are just, they're skyrocketing in price, and unless the YouTube money starts coming in, that's going to be a pipe dream for a very, very, very large number of people now. You know, I'm praying that the Mark 1 MR2 is still accessible by the time I can afford to actually buy one. But, you know, I'm happy with this one. I got a car off my list. I've actually got 2 cars off my list. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and put together what I think the Doug score would be, and maybe just talk about what my score would be for the car. Starting with the weekend category and styling, I think that styling is not that bad. I think it looks pretty average, pretty normal for a car from the 90s. But when you stand back, I actually think it looks pretty good. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Unfortunately, I don't think this is Doug's kind of car, so I imagine he would give it a 3 out of 10. Moving on to acceleration, it has absolutely none, but it is not the slowest car I've ever driven, so I give it a 2 out of 10. I believe Doug would give it a 1. Moving on to handling, it doesn't handle poorly, but it also doesn't handle very well. I would give it a 4 out of 10. Out of all the cars I've driven, it handles about below average, but I think its handling is pretty bad compared to some of the cars Doug has driven. I think he'd give it a 2. Now, fun factor, I think this car is very fun. I think it's a lot of fun to drive. I think it's a lot of fun to sit in. I think the T-tops really add to the fun factor, so I give it a 7 out of 10. I think Doug would recognize its fun value based on its off-road capabilities, and also, you know, it just being an impractical 2-seater car. I think he would give it a 4 out of 10. Moving on to cool factor, again, I think this car is very cool. Not the coolest I've ever seen. It's definitely not. It doesn't rank all the way up on the top of my list, but it did make my list, so I give it a 7 out of 10. I think Doug would think this car is a bit goofy and dweeby, so I think he'd give it a 3 out of 10. Making the weekend total for me a 26 out of 50 and a 13 out of 50 for Doug. Moving on to the daily categories, we got features. I give this car a 6 out of 10 because it does come with 4-wheel drive, and that's very useful here in the Midwest. I think Doug would give it more like a 3, considering it doesn't really have anything else going for it. As far as comfort is concerned, I'm a fairly tall individual, but I give it a 4 out of 10. It's not the most comfortable, but I don't mind sitting in it for long periods of time, so I give it a 4 out of 10. I think Doug would find this car very cramped. He seems to be a little bit on the taller side, so I think he would give it a 1 out of 10. Moving on to quality, I think that this car has a pretty high quality level. The motor seems to be pretty bulletproof, regardless of what you throw at it or how poorly you treat it. And the other elements seem to be holding up fairly well, considering the fact that it's completely rusted out. And I think the overall quality of the rest of the vehicle, Doug would give it a 4 out of 10. Now, practicality, I have to rank it pretty low. It's not a very practical car, and the number of times that I've been driving it and needed to be driving something else, I have to give it a 2 out of 10, and I think Doug would give it a 1 out of 10 for the least amount of practicality. Now, overall value, mine was pretty much a steal, and it has appreciated since then, so I give it a 4 out of 10. I don't think that Doug will see any value in it, considering the fact that they're not really worth that much money anymore. But it does seem to be going up as they become rarer and rarer, and good models will fetch, you know, a fair bit of change. So, and I think he would give it a 2 out of 10, bringing my daily total to 21 and his daily total to 11. And when you combine both of those categories, my total is 47, which puts it around some of these other comparable vehicles, like the older Wrangler Renegade, another Suzuki Swift Booster Jet, the Lamborghini LM002, and an old Jeep Cherokee. Now, If Doug were to review this car, and my score is even remotely accurate, this would be the worst car he's ever reviewed at a 24, which puts it below the BMW Isetta, making that just one more reason I don't think he would ever review this car. Issues with the car, I mean... Okay, I gotta get out.